Buonasera, benvenuti. Io sono Mauro Baronchelli, il direttore operativo di Palazzo Grassi e sono molto contento di avervi qui e di darvi il benvenuto per questo appuntamento che sta diventando una nostra consuetudine grazie alla collaborazione con l'Italian Innovation Program. Si tratta di un appuntamento estremamente interessante perché ci consente di riflettere in modo più verticale rispetto ad aspetti che magari non vengono così affrontati pubblicamente, ma che sono strategici all'interno della vita dei musei e delle nostre istituzioni. E anche per questa ragione sono molto felice di vedere tra voi molti colleghi e molti collaboratori che lavorano in altre istituzioni, in altri musei e con cui possiamo confrontarci proprio a partire da questa serata. Ringrazio molto Laura Miller, che è responsabile marketing del Guggenheim Museum di New York e che questa sera ci aiuterà a entrare nel suo lavoro che svolge da più di 20 anni come responsabile delle politiche di marketing di questo importante museo. Grazie e buona serata.
Buonasera, good evening. I'd like to thank Mark Omar and Carlotta Baruto for inviting me here to participate in the Italia Innovation Program here in Venice. And also a big thanks to the Palazzo Grassi for hosting my talk here this evening. It's really a treat to be in the Teatrino. I'm honored to have had the last few days with students from around the world from business schools and undergraduate schools, and to talk with them about marketing at the Guggenheim, as well as to partner with 10 leading companies in Italy. And there are many parallels between what we do in the Guggenheim, believe it or not, and Italian companies. I've really been fascinated by how there's a sense of family values, there's a value of superb design, exceptional quality materials, and a real interest in forward thinking around the use of technology to serve customers. So that's been a really eye-opening experience. My talk will last just under an hour, and I'd love to have an opportunity for you to ask questions or afterwards if you like. So for those of you that haven't been to New York, I just wanted to give you a slide to show where the Guggenheim Foundation and Museum is located in New York. It's on Fifth Avenue across from Central Park. Tonight I'd like to cover 5 things. First, I'm just going to provide a little background on the Guggenheim brand. Then I will talk about evolution of marketing at the Guggenheim, who our visitors are, and what impact that has had on our marketing strategy. In particular, I'm going to highlight some of our recent digital initiatives as examples of what we might call content marketing. It's a way that we have expanded how we reach and engage with visitors online. So the Guggenheim holds a unique place in the history of museums. The Guggenheim Foundation was established 79 years ago by the wealthy philanthropist Solomon R. Guggenheim, and he had an artist advisor named Hilla Rebay. She was a young German baroness who his wife hired to paint his portrait. Now, Rebay saw something in Solomon. She decided to introduce him to experimental trends in contemporary European painting. Rebay embraced something called non-objectivity. Non-objectivity is the absence of anything you recognize in a painting. She embraced it as both a style of painting as well as an aesthetic philosophy, believing it was infused with a mystical quality that art would transcend. And she decided to take Solomon and introduce him to the work of radical new artists such as Vasily Kandinsky. Eventually, Solomon purchased many works, including 150 Kandinskys. This is Kandinsky's Composition 8 pictured here. In 1939, the Museum of Non-Objective Painting was founded, and it was established in a former automobile showroom on East 54th Street in New York to display Salomond's collection. It was not long before Rebay envisioned a much larger museum to house Salomon's growing collection. And Rebay was familiar with the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, who's a great American architect. And here we see a picture of Frank Lloyd Wright on the left, Hilaire Rebay in the center, and on the right, Salomon R. Guggenheim. And they're standing there with an architectural model of the museum. In 1959, the museum opened. 6 months prior to the museum opening, Frank Lloyd Wright died. And the building was completed, but was instantly hailed as a visionary work of architecture, and perhaps Frank Lloyd Wright's greatest masterpiece. Over the years, the building's landmark status has continued to attract over 1 million visitors each year to its gently curving ramps. The distinctive shape of the building is integral to the museum's identity. The building is a core brand element. What we call the rotunda, the big round spiral, serves as both a point of access, the way to circulate throughout the museum, and the museum is a sculpture, a work of art in itself. Last year, CNN noted that on Google Sites Maps, that the Guggenheim is one of the 10 most photographed places in the world. It's hard to believe, right? Founded on the strength of Solomon R. Guggenheim's collection of non-objective masterpieces, the collection's growth has come through donations and purchases of a small number of great international modern and contemporary collections. So the Guggenheim has never taken an encyclopedic approach to collecting the way, say, the Museum of Modern Art has in New York. Instead, the strength of our collection is really based on the vision of a small number of very persistent individual collectors. So the insistence of the museum's founders on a revolutionary kind of art seen in a radically different space set the Guggenheim on its path. And throughout our history, the museum stands as a groundbreaking institution geared really as much about the future and its possibilities as the preservation of the past. For those of you in Venice, you're probably familiar, but there are quite a few students here who have not yet been to our sister institution, the Peggy Guggenheim Collection, which is just down the street from the Punta della Dogana. It is a gem located in the Palazzo del Leone on the Grand Canal, and Peggy Guggenheim was Salomon R. Guggenheim's niece. In 1979, the palazzo was donated to the Guggenheim Foundation, so that both Venice and the New York museums started the beginning of the museum's international orientation. The Peggy Guggenheim collection includes masterpieces by Marcel Duchamp and Max Ernst, who she was once married to, and I saw the collection again this morning for the first time in 15 years, and they are some of the best Max Ernst I've ever seen. So I urge you to see it before you leave Venice. In 1997, the museum in Bilbao opened, the Guggenheim Museo Bilbao. It was built by the Basque government of Spain, and it is managed by the Guggenheim. The Museo Guggenheim Bilbao is designed by architect Frank Gehry, and it was hailed by critics worldwide as an architectural masterpiece. The positive economic impact the Guggenheim Bilbao has had is a key component of the Basque government's urban redevelopment program, and it's been labeled the Bilbao effect. So since that time, numerous governments and philanthropists have approached the Guggenheim to explore the possibility of building additional Guggenheim museums. Another recent endeavor is the ongoing planning and development of a new Guggenheim in Abu Dhabi. It is also designed by architect Frank Gehry, and it's the largest Guggenheim to date. It will be located in the cultural district of Saadiyat Island in Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the United Arab Emirates. So the Guggenheim has positioned itself as an international museum with what we call a constellation of distinctive architectural museum sites, exhibitions, and educational programs. As a result of international expansion, many Guggenheim exhibitions and programs travel to other venues and reach an increasingly diverse international audience. Today, with nearly 3 million annual visitors worldwide, the Guggenheim and its network is one of the world's most visited cultural institutions. This summer, if you happen to be going to Florence at the Palazzo Strozzi, is an exhibition from Kandinsky to Picasso, the art of the Guggenheim collection. In June of 2014, we staged an architectural competition in Helsinki to design a Guggenheim there. It was an open, blind architectural competition, and it generated a record 1,700 submissions from over 77 countries. Last year in June, from 6 finalists, the winner was a young Paris-based firm, Muro Kusanagi, and they were selected. Their design is clad in locally sourced charred timber and glass, and it's an environmentally sensitive building that would comprise 9 low-lying volumes and 1 lighthouse-like tower. It's meant to invite visitors to engage with museum artworks and programs across a gathering of linked pavilions and plazas organized around an interior street. And when I learned this, I thought this week, that's a lot like Venice, isn't it? In some ways, although it's sensitive to Helsinki. This week, I was delighted to have a student turn to me and say, "So what is marketing?" And my own mother was asking the same question. There are many terms that you might hear a museum use to describe aspects of what might be called marketing. Sometimes it's communications, media relations, outreach to journalists, audience development, branding, advertising, external affairs, audience engagement, and digital engagement. So just so we're all on the same page, we do focus on our core customer. In the case of museums, it might be a visitor. And we focus on a very tightly integrated effort to discover, create, arouse, engage, and satisfy visitor needs. And we do that both before, during, and after a visit. Now, historically in the United States, museums didn't have marketing until the late 90s. And a museum's organizational structure, to some extent, reflects the potential impact of marketing's role within an institution. When I joined the Guggenheim in the mid-90s, I was the director of visitor services. There was a marketing coordinator who reported to me and a very limited marketing budget. I reported to the chief financial officer. The Guggenheim had a director of public relations, but they were part of the development department. Today, marketing department is part of a group called Global Communications. And within that group, there's marketing, public relations, and some staff that work on global projects. Our web team is part of a different area now, but at times has been part of the marketing area. This is my amazing staff of 5. We also have 2 interns this summer. And 5 years ago, I was able to add 3 new positions to my department due to rapid growth in the demand for both email and social media support, as well as low and no cost promotions. We have very limited resources, despite a pretty well-known brand. The majority of our marketing efforts are in support of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York City, but we also work on special global projects. The network museums manage their own communications and marketing. So getting back to what we do and what marketing is, we plan and implement strategic programs. We leverage both traditional and digital media. We primarily focus on revenue generation. How can we build attendance, box office, membership, cafe and retail sales? But we work collaboratively, and overall, our goal is to deliver a superior visitor experience. And in turn, that contributes to maintaining the museum's excellence and global reputation. I think it's well worth returning to my business school days and what is sometimes called the 5, 6, or sometimes there's 7 Ps, but tonight we have 5. So marketing starts with the customer, and in this case, the product is the visitor experience. Now that might be very focused on permanent collection, it might be a special exhibition, could be a public program that educators are offering, it could be programs for schools, dining, shopping. Sometimes now we even work to market our digital publications and media. Positioning is what sets you apart. How are you different from other museums and entertainment options? It could be defined by attributes. We could say that we have a critically acclaimed exhibition that the New York Times has just given a star. We could talk about benefits, such as it's an experiential exhibition. We had a Chinese artist named Sai Kuo-cheng who invited visitors to canoe in a river. That was part of one of his works. That's one of the great examples. Or we could have visitor-directed programs. So for example, on Sundays, we have programs for families where they can drop into an art studio with their kids. In terms of place, we think about where we are offering our services. In addition to the museum location itself, we have our affiliate locations in Bilbao and Venice, other venues such as in Florence. We also have a number of online opportunities on websites, social media platforms, our ebooks, podcasts, apps, and blogs. In terms of promotion, we'll talk a little bit about that later. Whenever we think about starting a new project, which is often, we start by thinking about which departments we need to collaborate with across the museum. And the idea is to think about all of the materials that we might have to work with, whether it's audio, video, text that a curator has written, is there media coverage, what is planned for a blog post, and we think about how are we going to deliver a consistent message. And we try to do that everywhere that a visitor might engage. So that's everything from on-site signage and our print advertising to our monthly e-news and Instagram as an example. Because marketing starts with who your audience is, in a museum, it starts with our closest family, our board, our funders, our members. And then, of course, staff and volunteers are an important part of the family. We have professional colleagues in the art world, the design world, architecture, news media. Journalists are a very important constituency. And then finally, we have visitors, both on-site and online, and many, many segments that we target within that particular audience. When I first arrived at the Guggenheim, I had no idea who our visitors were. And since that time, we implement on a regular basis quantitative exit surveys. And we did that because it was important to create a demographic profile of who our visitors are. We needed to know, why do they visit the museum? And we wanted to measure satisfaction with every aspect of their visit, from what they thought of the art, to interaction with our staff. Were things okay in the cafe? How was the shop? We look at awareness and interest in our programs, and whether their visit was in response to any form of paid advertising. So that helps inform future investment decisions. We look at the intent to return to the museum as another measure of satisfaction. And we also have sponsors who sometimes are very interested in whether or not anybody noticed the brand association with sponsor and what they thought of it. So who is a Guggenheim visitor? This is a picture from about a week ago of a member event. It turned out that our visitors were something other than what was expected by our curatorial staff in particular. The Guggenheim visitor is likely to be a relatively young, educated tourist. 80% of our visitors are tourists. 55% are international tourists, and only 25% are US tourists. Less than 20% are from New York City and the greater New York area. Admissions revenue accounts for approximately 20% of our operating budget. So we're highly dependent on admissions, and that is a much higher percentage than the average North American art museum, which is around 4% of the operating budget. Our visitors are as likely to be female as male, and they're relatively young. More than 49% are under the age of 35, yet they're extremely well educated. Over 75% have at least a college degree, and 42% hold postgraduate degrees. By comparison, in the United States, the average have about 30% have a college degree, and just 17% have gone to graduate school. So when we looked at what factors were important in deciding to visit, overall, the majority of tourists and New Yorkers come because of the museum's international reputation. For tourists, the building's landmark Frank Lloyd Wright architecture and our world-renowned permanent collection are the most important factors. Special exhibitions are much more important to attracting New Yorkers. This is an image from our tourism advertising campaign, and as a result of the research, we focused it on the building and the permanent collection. The tagline reads, "If this is the form, imagine the art inside." The ad runs in tourist publications and on maps. It's distributed in hotel rooms and tourist information centers. And we mention special exhibitions, but not really specifically. Approximately 30% of our marketing budget is directed toward tourism. So we began to look at, well, what is it that we have to do to attract New Yorkers? And for New Yorkers, select special exhibitions outrank the Frank Lloyd Wright building and collection in importance. These exhibitions tend to fall into three clusters. The first are contemporary art exhibitions accompanied by strong design interventions. And what's pictured here is a 2011 mid-career retrospective of the Italian artist Maurizio Cattelan. And the name of the show is Maurizio Cattelan All, because he hung all of the work from the center of the Guggenheim Rotunda. It was an amazing sight, and we thought we have to feature this in our advertising campaign. Our advertising incorporated the brand experience both with the architectural space and the kind of visual wow factor, like what is that? What's going on there? We were the first museum to use quotes in our advertising, and that was modeled on the film industry and how feature films are released. They always include quotes and tell you who the movie stars are. So this quote is from the New York Times. It said, "One of the most audacious exhibitions in the Guggenheim's half-century." That was a pretty good way to attract attention, and it was a very popular show. The second type of exhibition that we use to attract New Yorkers are architectural exhibitions. We've had exhibitions for architects Frank Gehry, Zaha Hadid, and the Frank Lloyd Wright exhibition that's pictured here. They were all particularly well attended. To target New Yorkers, we use subway posters. This is a subway poster. And the reason we do it is there are over 5 million people a day that ride the subways in New York, so it's a fantastic way to reach both tourists and New Yorkers very cost effectively. Finally, New Yorkers and tourists predictably flock to what we call once-in-a-lifetime exhibitions. This is an image from our Kandinsky exhibition. It drew on the museum's significant holdings of Kandinsky, and it was combined with the collections from the two other major holders of Kandinsky's in the world, the Pompidou and the Stadtliche Gallery in Munich, so that we put on this retrospective that really illuminated the artist's entire career and shows his development. The exhibition held the record for attendance and until the summer of 2013 when we had a James Turrell exhibition. This is a picture of an iPad, and I wanted to put it here because of what we were doing, it attracted the interest of Apple. So nobody goes to Apple, Apple comes to you, and they came to us and they were interested in our website, and it was the design aesthetic and the fact that we were an international museum. So they featured our website in their advertising campaign for about 3 years, and it ran in their stores. And this example was from a television broadcast that they ran during the Olympics in 2012. So you might have noticed some inconsistencies in some of the materials I was showing you because there was an evolution of the museum's logo and brand. It was refreshed in 2010 by Pentagram, and the word museum was dropped because there was growing international awareness of the Guggenheim, and nobody ever called it the Guggenheim Museum, it's just Guggenheim. So it was a much more contemporary look, and we wanted to strengthen it. So overall, the Guggenheim presents a global constellation of museums and exhibitions that provide extraordinary visual arts experiences in landmark architectural settings designed by world-renowned architects. About 7 years ago, we realized that there were many advances in digital technology, and that would allow us to carry out the museum's mission like never before. And we wanted to extend our programming online as a way to reach new audiences worldwide and to build long-term connections and dialogue around art and artists. And we do that through our website, social media, email, campaigns, our mobile app, and blogs. And I wanted to show you this slide. It is an image of a digital ecosystem. And it was for one of our previous global projects, the BMW Guggenheim Lab. I'm not going to get into that project, but what this slide illustrates is the visitor at the center. And the idea that a visitor has many platforms that they use on a daily basis. They might visit on site and have an interactive experience with an app or some sort of online program. And each of our core constituencies views content in different ways. And sometimes you might be sitting there with your mobile phone and watching a video on your iPad, and the television might be on in the same room. So we want to make sure that wherever a visitor is and whatever they're looking at, if they're looking at social media platforms or our app, we want to provide a seamless and consistent experience with what they're seeing. And this required a new kind of thinking. We have to think not only about local visitors, but increasingly about who are our audiences online. There might be people that have never been to the Guggenheim, or maybe they've never been anywhere. We have a large audience in India as a result of the BMW project. And we worked with some digital consultants during that project, and they taught us that having a website as a hub, which is often people think, oh yeah, you put things on your website, it's a hub. And you're like, no, that's the old way of thinking. And so now we need to think about how all the channels work together in a digital ecosystem. So we were very excited about those opportunities, but it has been a very ongoing challenge to figure out how to do that in a museum with a small number of staff. Sometimes there's a lot of turnover in staff, and it is very challenging when you have limited budgets, but it is a very exciting opportunity that we continue to pursue. So this image, if you haven't seen it, is our homepage of the newly relaunched and redesigned Guggenheim website. We just completed a targeted redesign in April, and it was critical. The first thing we needed to do was to provide a mobile-friendly user experience. We did not have a mobile-friendly website until April, and more than half our audience is mobile, so the fact that they couldn't really see what we were doing needed to be fixed. We unified it with a contemporary visual aesthetic, and there was a real focus on having art and artists take center stage. We also simplified the information architecture so that people could find things more easily, and throughout the site there's a lot more opportunity to really discover things that were hidden before. We learned through a lot of analysis of data, past data, that people couldn't find information on the Frank Lloyd Wright building. So it was the #1 thing in the research, but it turned out that it was pretty hard to find that information on the website, so that was fixed. And then on the back end, we needed a brand new digital infrastructure so that we could operate in the future much more seamlessly. So our website is run out of New York City and includes basic information on our museums in Venice and Bilbao, but it really just directs traffic to those museums, and they have their own websites in multiple languages themselves. We have about 6 million web visits annually to the Guggenheim website, so it's a pretty big audience. The website also functions as an educational resource for all audiences. It features an online collection of over 1,600 works, and you can get information about the artists and the works. We also have ebooks, essays, archives, and we have curriculum guides for educators that help teach across multiple disciplines. So marketing collaborates very closely with our web team. This is an example of the Engage section of the new website. And we meet bi-weekly to try to coordinate what we're doing. And we review, what are you doing on the blog? What's happening? Will this video be done? This is a page which shows our SoundCloud. It's a social platform that is an audio platform. We have over 750,000 followers. And we have both historic radio interviews, but we also feature current exhibition audio tour content so that people can listen either before or after a visit if they want to. So we work very hard to coordinate the release, the timing, to make sure that a press release goes out and doesn't go out before there's actually something for the press to see on a website. It might sound simple, but coordinating the timing across every platform, emails, social media, blog posts, websites, takes a fair amount of scheduling. We drive awareness and referrals to content such as our blogs through a weekly e-news digest, which you see on the screen. So we had these great blog posts, and we needed to build an audience for our blog, and one of the things we decided to do was send a weekly blog digest. We have over 130,000 people that have asked to receive Guggenheim emails in various segments. And so now if you want to subscribe to just global information, you can do that on our website, and we will send you things like a blog digest. We also use social media and paid promotion to support what we're doing digitally. With support from Bloomberg Financial Group, we officially launched a free mobile app in 2013. Our app includes information on the Guggenheim collection, and it's available in 5 languages, which is extremely important given that our audience is 55% international and doesn't speak English as a first language. We have information on collection works and video and audio for select special exhibitions. For visitors who are blind, we have verbal description guides. We are also very pleased to have launched a new building guide for kids to engage children, and we have an American Sign Language video, so that is for visitors who are deaf or hard of hearing. The launch of the app has led to an increase in traffic on our website and also social media activity from mobile platforms. Last December, we added a new feature in conjunction with our app called Near Me. And what it does is it utilizes something called iBeacon technology in the galleries. And it automatically presents visitors with audio, video, and text that's related to something near them, whether it's an object of art or something about the architecture. So it offers a very site-specific experience, and it's much more intuitive as you move through the museum, and people love it. I love it. And I'm really excited about future marketing opportunities. And I don't want to get invasive, and I don't want to ruin the visitor experience, but if somebody is sitting in the Guggenheim Cafe and we can deliver a message that says, join today, become a member, and save 10% on your check, and visit our Guggenheim shop and save 10%. So it's a way to direct people's attention to something that will benefit them in hopefully not too invasive way. The Guggenheim Foundation's social media presence has rapidly expanded over the last 7 years also. We have over 30 social media networks, including Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and many others. Marketing leads a cross-departmental social media working group, but my team actively posts, monitors, and interacts with users on a 24/7 basis. It is a very labor-intensive undertaking. So even though social media is perceived as free, it is not without a great deal of effort. As of June 1st, the Guggenheim's combined social media following exceeds combined 3 million followers on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So it's approximately 3 times the number of visitors to the museum in New York. So we have more than 1.4 million followers on Twitter, and Instagram just recently surpassed our following on Facebook. We have more than 828,000 followers, and we're the 3rd largest following in the world amongst art museums active on Instagram. It's kind of scary, actually. We're getting about 1,000 followers a day, and it puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the fact I have 2 staff that are dedicated to social media and email and all of our digital initiatives. We have 739 followers on Facebook. So all of the departments at the Guggenheim are really clamoring for social media now. Everybody is excited about it. And we also have increased interest from sponsors. We've attracted the attention of people such as Christian Dior, who sponsor our international gala for 3 years, and they're really interested in our social media and what we're going to be doing with them. This is our Twitter page, and we use Twitter to share newsworthy content. We usually provide live coverage of our press previews, and we share selected photos and videos with journalists. We use Twitter to recruit staff and volunteers, and sometimes we use it for last-minute ticket sales. So I'm going to take you through some of the things that are working on our social channels. Just to give you a sense of what is newsworthy content, because museums are not always breaking news, let's face it. We announced that we had 109 digitized Guggenheim catalogs from our archives available free on our website, and that was very popular. In December, we had an artist named Thomas Cereceño, and he was giving a talk on his artistic practices, and he uses these really immersive installations, and this is, I don't know if you can see the image, but it's pretty amazing when you look at it. We had not sold hardly any tickets to his talk, which was really quite upsetting. He's an amazing artist, and the issue was we were just prior to the Christmas holidays, and so it's not the easiest time of year. We did what's called a promoted post. We spent $125 US to make sure that our followers in New York City knew about this talk. And so we went from not having sold very many tickets to selling out his talk. So it can work sometimes, although we prefer to be very authentic with what we're doing online. Every September, Twitter has something called Ask a Curator Day. And it is a global conversation that museums are invited to participate in. To talk about art with curators. And last September, we decided it would be nice to introduce a brand new curator that we have. He's Troy Conrad Theron, and he is the Guggenheim Curator of Architecture and Digital Media. And you might wonder, what is a curator of architecture and digital media? So we were wondering that too. We decided to test something called Periscope. If you're not familiar with it, it is a live streaming video app that is associated with Twitter. And so we interviewed him in the galleries just prior to Ask a Curator, and that was a way to generate some interest for him to explain to people what he does. And during Ask a Curator, we had over 50 questions that he answered, so it was a very engaging opportunity for our audience over the 1-hour Q&A that was staged. Another way to expand our audiences is to participate in industry-wide initiatives. And every year, we have something called Museum Week with Twitter. This year, there were 2,800 museums around the world that participated, and it drives awareness, and it drives a lot of media coverage. They estimated that more than 294 million people saw Museum Week, so it's very exciting. But every day, they have a different theme. And sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out what to do, and the very last day, the theme was love. And we were trying to figure out, what are we going to do for love? We don't have hearts in our collection, really. And the point I want to make here is when you have a lot of new followers on social media, you can often go back to something that worked in the past. This is an image of our James Turrell exhibition from 2013. It was very, very popular. It was our most visited exhibition in the museum's history. And we went back and we posted this, and we said, we end Pound Museum Week with installations we love by artists who are inspired to respond to our architecture. Pound Love MW. We also repurposed this post for Instagram, and it had more than 95,000 likes. There's Museum Selfie Day every year, and what I wanted to point out here is the importance of trying to link what you do to popular culture. We recently had Sesame Street doing a shoot at the museum. I think they were doing C is for Cézanne in our permanent collection, and we had this wonderful selfie that Cookie Monster did. So we posted, even Cookie Monster loves Pound Museum Selfie Day. share your photos, your favorite photos of the building throughout the day. And the other thing I wanted to point out is the importance of inviting participation. So really how we engage with our audiences and how we relate to popular culture. It's very popular. Facebook is an incredibly important platform for museums. Today, there are more than 1.6 billion active users on Facebook. So it's still the #1 way for museums to engage with a much larger and diverse audience around the world. It's also one of our top referring sites to our website. The profile of the museum's following on Facebook is even more international than the foundation, than our visitorship on site. 72% of our fans are from outside the United States, from more than 45 countries, and around 8% of our fans are from the greater New York area. Now, what we've noticed on Facebook in the last year is something very exciting. We've had a complete change now that you can embed video on Facebook. And we've seen that Facebook and all of our platforms is all about video. Video engages like nothing else. And I read about 2 weeks ago that the head of Facebook in Europe and the Middle East said that within 5 years, there will be no text or images on Facebook. It will all be video. So you heard it here. It's going to be all video within 5 years. It's an amazing fact. We don't have a budget for video. So approximately 2 years ago, we tried to figure out how are we going to create a promotional video in support of what we're doing. And our app team was creating videos, and they were pretty much directed by our curators. Curators would talk about an exhibition and introduce it. And I was able to collaborate with our digital media team to begin to produce a 1-minute, what we call now the marketing promo video. And so we had a situation this summer, which is very typical. And I should have mentioned that in New York, it's a very, very competitive market. We have major museums, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Museum of Modern Art, Guggenheim, many other small, wonderful museums. And last summer, the Whitney Museum of American Art opened a brand new museum at the base of the High Line, which is a major tourist destination. And their first year attendance was 1.3 million. So all of a sudden, a museum that might have had an attendance less than 300,000 was playing in the big leagues, and it had an impact on what we do. So it's highly competitive. And this summer at the Guggenheim, we opened a retrospective of the artist MoholyNagy. He's an amazing artist who worked in multiple media, and he really embraced new industrial materials and the idea that art and industry should work hand in hand for the betterment of mankind. So I was like, this is the guy who would have loved social media. He would have been all over it. And so we created a short promo video, and I want to show it to you to get a sense of what you can do with no money. Now, it obviously costs a little bit of money internally to create a video, but it's easier than ever to make a video. You can do it on your iPhone, and it is the way of the future. This video generated more than 104,000 likes, and it was 104,000 views, sorry, and 2,400 likes. So it was not promoted, and it's just an example of.
Well, Moholy was definitely an avant-garde artist, one of the most significant and exciting artists of the 20th century. In the United States, there hasn't been a major solo exhibition in nearly 50 years. We love to pigeonhole artists and we want them to be a painter, we want them to be a sculptor, a photographer. Well, Moholy was all of these and beyond. He was a utopian, but I think he was also very pragmatic. Moholy had the curiosity of a scientist, attracted to all things modern, to speed, to new industrial design, to movement. Moholy very much believed that it was important for artists to be working with the materials of their own times, whether it be with painting, canvas, plastic. He was experimenting with plexiglass and then mounting his work in such a way that he could achieve the light effects that he was so keen on. He's also at the foreground of photography and of understanding photography in a modern way. He was a pioneer in so many areas. He was thinking about ways of looking at art, considering art and making art in a way which I think is very contemporary. And I think he's one of these timeless artists. I think he could probably be at home today.
I'm going to show you another short video as an example of the other kind of video we've seen a lot of success with. It's a time-lapse video of a behind-the-scenes installation. It was a very labor-intensive 10-day process for an exhibition also on view this summer at the Guggenheim. The artist is Nadia Kabalinke, and it's a suspended sculpture, very complicated installation of her work called Flying Carpets. So we've seen that audiences really are interested in things like conservation, and they're really interested in what is going on behind getting one of these major works into a Guggenheim or another museum. Oops. I should have mentioned that video was for the Guggenheim UBS map. It's one of our global art initiatives, and the exhibition is called But a Storm is Blowing from Paradise, Contemporary Art of the Middle East and North Africa. So you could kind of tell by the music it was the feel of the exhibition. And that video reached about 62,000 people and received 12,000 likes on Facebook. We always see with artist birthdays, everybody loves artist birthdays across every platform. And this was a recent example with Kandinsky. It had more than 61,000 likes, comments, and shares. And part of what worked was we, again, invited user-generated response. So we said, explore these works online and tell us which is your favorite Kandinsky and why. And people really like to look at art and tell you what they think. On YouTube, I wanted to point out that it's the world's second largest search engine. And I read that more than 100 hours of video are being added each minute to YouTube. So searching for what you want is going to be essential. With the increasing interest in video online, dedicated YouTube channels such as this one, which is for our performing arts it's a performing arts program called Works in Process, are really important. They allow us to share sneak peek video clips that help to encourage ticket sales, and to do post-performance video, which is a means to vastly expand our audience. We've also tested some live streaming on YouTube. We did a program with American Ballet Theatre, which is pretty well known, ABT, and it was watched by more than 9,700 viewers, which is about 17 times the size of our 281-seat theater. So Facebook acquired Instagram, if you didn't know that, and since that time, the growth has really expanded. We see that Instagram followers are quite a bit like our Facebook followers. They're very international. And we see that architecture is very, very popular. And we invited an artist named Rich McCorway. Recently, he crafted this little flower, and it's a very playful way to work with the building. Our followers love this. And the other thing I wanted to point out was this hashtag, which we created, #FrankLloyd Wright Fridays. The idea was to do, again, the messaging on a very consistent basis, and Friday and Frank sounds good. And it is a way to have an ongoing conversation, and hashtags allow you to aggregate all of those conversations over time, so you can look it up on search and see what people are saying. Frank Lloyd Wright Fridays is so popular that it has been adopted by other Frank Lloyd Wright sites. And that post received more than almost 12,000 likes. On Instagram, we ran a shorter version of the video I just showed you for MoholyNagy. And Instagram in recent days, really, or recent weeks, has gone from just allowing a 15-second video to now a little bit longer video. So it's going to explode further. Most people don't listen to audio, though, so it's a challenge to think about creating video across every platform, and the fact that you might not have audio sometimes. That post on Instagram received almost 19,000 views. We work with Instagram to do what's called an Insta Meet, and our first one was on the occasion of the museum's, the building's birthday, which was October 21st in 2014. And we invited 25 influencers in the world of architecture to come to the museum before it opened, and to have a chance to be in the empty Guggenheim. We provided them with a hashtag and some access to places that not every visitor gets to go, such as the roof of the museum. As a result of the Insta Meet, that was in the early days of our Instagram feed, and we had over 100,000 new followers as a result of that Insta Meet. We just hosted our third Insta Meet in conjunction with the MoholyNagy Exhibition, which opened just in May. And again, I had no marketing budget to support that exhibition. So I was telling the contact that I work with at New York City and Company, which is New York City's tourism development organization. I was explaining to her that MoholyNagy was this amazing artist, and that it was just driving me crazy that we didn't have any money to advertise the exhibition. So she said, well, let's work together. Let's host an Insta Meet. We'll bring in tourism journalists and you bring in the art and design and we'll do an Insta Meet. So we decided to host it an hour before the press preview. And we did that again so they could have an empty special experience, a small number of influencers, about 20. And they came in and were given a little mini tour by the curator. We spent a lot of time preparing for an Insta Meet in terms of researching which influencers we wanted to have come, and also preparing what we call a cheat sheet. So we selected the works that the curators thought we should highlight as they wandered through, and we gave them the information we wanted them to have, the citations, and as well as the press materials. And then they were welcome to stay for our press preview and to have breakfast. And it really was superb for kickstarting all of our outreach to the press. And we got a very nice review the next day in the New York Times. Another interesting idea that you might want to try in Italy or wherever you're from is an idea that was advanced by Instagram in New York. And they approached us and they said, okay, there are 18 museums in New York City, and this was in February, and we want to pair you with a museum that you normally would have nothing to do with. And in the Guggenheim's case, they asked us to partner with the Liberty Science Center, which is across the river from New York City in New Jersey, and it's kind of a family destination. They have about 6,000 followers on Instagram. And the idea was to really open up what a museum is doing through different eyes. And one of the things we offered to the Liberty Science Center was really great photographers. We have a very high aesthetic. We have 2 superb in-house museum photographers, and we sent them over and they took really nice pictures that we in turn used to post about the museum. And on the right, you see one of our posts, and we said, as we entered at Liberty Science Center for Pound Museum Insta Swap, we were captivated by the monumental Hoberman sphere that hangs in the museum's atrium. It's a much larger version of the iconic children's toys. So we helped drive quite a bit of traffic. The photos that we shared on Instagram over the course of Museum Swap generated over 27,000 likes. The last digital initiative I'd like to share with you is a recent project that I started working on last summer. And if you're not familiar with the Google Cultural Institute, I welcome you to visit this site. It's an amazing site which has just relaunched a redesign in the past week or 2. And they've partnered with more than 1,000 museums and cultural organizations. And I will admit that the Guggenheim was one of the last museums in New York City, one of the last major museums to join this free platform that Google has offered over the years. It's sometimes called the Google Arts Project. And the reason we hadn't joined is, quite frankly, that it requires a human staff resource, a significant one, to format and upload imagery and do all of the things. And we're already busy doing that within the museum's own platforms. But I saw a presentation that a Google representative did in New York to some arts communications colleagues, and they showed this brand new technology that they use to create a 360-degree view of the Grand Palais in Paris. And when I saw that, I had an aha moment. I said, we have to have that. We have this Frank Lloyd Wright Rotunda. You can take your mouse and drive it around. So it was quite an internal challenge, but we managed to convince our lawyers and our conservators and our registrars that we could have a drone shoot at the Guggenheim. So over a 2-day period, the first day we worked with a drone engineer specialist to test and to take images that a drone flying up and down the Guggenheim took. And then the next day, Google has a street view team. You're probably familiar with street view images that you see when you look on a Google map. And they come in with this special technology and they take pictures, and then there's somebody with a tripod, traditional tripod images. And over a 3-month period, Google engineers somewhere in Budapest or something like that stitched all of the imagery together to create a 360 experience. And that experience was due to launch in January 21st. And it made it possible now, you can now go to the website and travel up and down the ramps. Additionally, we had a permanent collection exhibition last summer on view. So as you might know, there are rights issues. You can't always show contemporary artwork without clearing artist rights, but we had cleared the majority of rights with these artists because it's part of our contemporary collection. So you can also click on these images and learn about works in the Guggenheim collection. It was called Storylines, Contemporary Art at the Guggenheim. And then finally, I was able to find a dedicated staff person on the Guggenheim UBS MAP Global Art Initiative. And she was somebody I enlisted to help upload all of the works that are being acquired for the Guggenheim's collection, and they're coming in from South and Southeast Asia, Latin America, and now the Middle East and North Africa. So what's great about this is there were works such as this one pictured here. This is artist Sapi Pitch, and this is Morning Glory. It's a monumental work, and it was so big that it wasn't on view in New York. And I believe it was on view in Singapore, but it didn't fit in the Guggenheim in New York. So what the Google Art Project allows us to do is to provide access. And you can click in, it's very high-res photos, and you can take a look around at art that otherwise you wouldn't be able to see. In December, right before the holidays, I heard from Google again, and they're a really interesting, iterative, there's always something exciting happening. And they called up and said, so, are you interested in virtual reality? And I said, oh yes. It's really the buzzword in the digital world this year. And they are pioneering something called Expeditions, which uses the Google Cardboard platform. And they were working with museums, the American Museum of Natural History in New York, but they thought, well, maybe we can take the street views that were just created of the Guggenheim, and would you do something with that with an expedition? And I thought, what am I going to do? I don't want to say no to this. I really want to do this. So I sat down with our director of education and I said, is there any way we could take our existing curriculum guide that helps teachers teach in relation to the Frank Lloyd Wright architecture and repurpose that for this expedition? And she said, well, I'm going to be taking 2 weeks off for Christmas, and I guess I could do that. So she did. She repurposed the content, and we worked with Google in February to launch our expedition. So that allows students now around the world and teachers, and Google provides the cardboards and the Android devices, and they train teachers to work with students. And it's really quite the very early days of virtual reality, let me say. And it's not going to replace the on-site experience, but it does open up the museum to a much broader and more diverse audience. This is an image of TweetDeck, and it's just to point out the importance of using web-based platforms such as this, or we use something called Hootsuite. And we do this to monitor what's going on online. We produce a monthly social media report that is critical to informing our senior staff across the Guggenheim's network what is working, what's happening in terms of growth, our competitive position, and what is the response to some of the initiatives we're doing online. We also do reports on our email campaigns to look at open rates, how many people are opening our emails and what they're responding to in email. And we do this to educate our internal audiences and the museum's board, which are increasingly is also very interested in what we're up to. And finally, social media is very much important for development purposes. We leverage this outreach to all of our potential sponsors. So some key takeaways for today. if you've hopefully been inspired, are to really know who your customer is, your visitor is, and to think about them and what they're doing on every single device. And we are always thinking about what kind of content can we create to really delight and engage our audiences, whether it's art and artists, architecture, behind the scenes, how we're relating to popular culture. And it requires quite an ongoing effort to coordinate and to streamline our workflows. It's something we're continuing to work on. So we've really adopted a testing mindset, and it's painful. It never ends. Like, just when you think you figured something out, a platform like Foursquare becomes obsolete. And that's the way of digital. It's just always going to need testing, thinking, trying things, learning. We monitor both the media that we generate and that we earn from outside the museum, and it's very important to track engagement rates and what people are interested in, what they're talking about. And we use that to adapt what we're doing to trends and to what's happening in the world. And lastly, and most importantly, that collaboration is key. And it is often one of the most challenging things in nonprofit institutions. We need to work together both internally and externally. We work with the media, our corporate sponsors and donors, other museums and cultural organizations, trade associations, government organizations, online partners such as Google, who are very important and they help us to embrace really the power of art and the power of art to transcend and provide meaning in our everyday life.
First of all, thank you very much for this great speech. It's really interesting. The question is about the social media sector. How many persons are related in? And you mentioned there are two staff. So how they divided the work and how many persons are in?
So the question is how large a staff works on social media. There are two managers currently who oversee social media. So it's a very small staff with very large responsibility. And what we've done recently is to cross-train so that every member of the marketing department now is involved in social media. They might draft posts, they might monitor a certain keyword. We also have cross-trained across other departments increasingly. So our education staff, some of our global projects teams are responsible for drafting posts, but we ultimately oversee all of the final posts and all of the analysis.
Hi, name's Francis. You've enlightened us to all of the benefits of social media, especially also the new technologies with Google, etc. Is there also a downside to it? Is there any fear that it might take over, as in take away the interest of actually physically coming for the customer itself? Is there any
Well, there are
concerns?
those that fear that. There absolutely. My CFO is always worried. That's what CFOs do. They worry about people not coming and paying to to come to the museum. Honestly, I think it does the polar opposite. It allows us to reach millions of people who, some of them may never be able to visit the Guggenheim, but for those that we've reached, when they come to New York City, they're going to come. They're going to come. They're going to know us. They're already engaged in conversations about art with us. And it's really an exciting time to expand the global conversation around art. So I'm not afraid at all. I think the fear I have is not, in the US, I feel that we don't have the multilingual thing under control the way you do in Europe. That's hard. We don't have staff that speak 8 languages.
I'll take that key and just ask a second question if nobody has any concerns. from that point of view, can you advise or can you give an opinion for what the other countries where Guggenheim is coming out right now, or is already present? Is there any advice that you can give to them? Because in New York, that this, I guess, globalization, also from the social media and everything, it's a very key element, whereas maybe in Europe, it's scary, for lack of a better term. Does my question make sense?
Is your question whether or not local museums should be afraid of a global audience?
No, it's basically, there's a big difference between the US and Europe, per se, culture-wise. As you mentioned, it's also the whole fact that there's different cultures within Europe, whereas the States is, 50 states, it's American, there's an identity. Can you advise also, how can I put this? There's Guggenheim Venice, there's Guggenheim Bilbao, there's Guggenheim New York. Guggenheim New York is an entity. Can you also say that the same approaches of social media can work also for Guggenheim Venice and Guggenheim Spain?
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's the answer.
And we work very closely. In fact, is Maria Rita here, our social media manager here in Venice? So you can meet our social media collaborator. We like nothing better than to collaborate, and we do try to support when they're opening a new show, or we will put it on our platforms. It's the same Guggenheim collection, and they have wonderful exhibitions, and we see a very nice response. In terms of how they could build their audience, hopefully we can help our colleagues. We've had videos. I think the Bilbao video statistics are amazing, and they've had some great videos that have gotten huge response. And so we learn from our colleagues, actually. There are things that are done in Venice and Bilbao that are sometimes ahead of what we are doing in New York. They're smaller staffs, and when you're small, you're nimble. You get away with more.
Hello, thank you for your speech. I found it very clear. And my question is similar to that one. About human resources, you say you have 2 social media managers that connect with other departments of the museum. And my question is, how can you involve people that are used to other kind of work, or even a traditional way of intent marketing, in this kind of marketing that is very different? So which are the tasks you
So it's a
ask?
very good question. It's in a traditional museum setting, how do you get other departments involved and engaged in social media? And I think we've done it in a very organic way, meaning we observe. And there are curators who we've worked with who are just, they get it. They're excited about digital. They're on these platforms themselves. Our former senior curator, Nancy Spector, her sister urged her, and her children urged her into Instagram. And the next thing you knew, she was very active on Instagram, and we helped promote her as well. So she personally has quite a following, and you will see some curators, sometimes museum directors, who are active on social platforms. We have 2 people in our education department who are very digitally savvy, and sometimes educators, they're already working with students. When you're working with students are active on social platforms. So it just happens because that's how it worked. And we have had many training sessions for our education staff asked for that. We offer training to any curator who is interested. I think curators are realizing that they're traveling around, they're looking at art around the world, and people are really interested in that. And curators have the kind of access that we don't have. So we do coach and work closely with our curators. Sometimes we don't want to force them to do something they're not comfortable with, but we've had Pablo de la Parra was doing our Guggenheim program in Latin America, and as he traveled through Latin America, he was doing these wonderful posts on Instagram, and it was a way to see things. Well, who's going to Nicaragua and Guatemala and all these places and looking at these startup arts institutions? So it just happened very organically, and but you do have to keep an eye out. We had somebody in our finance department at one point. But the other thing that we do is we did formalize something in marketing. We saw that it is very hard to connect all of the different departments. So we started something once a month that we call DCC, Digital Content Coordination. And we have a big meeting. We get everybody at the same table, our archives. The archives is an amazing treasure trove of content. And those staff aren't real digitally, they're not really into social media, but the idea that all this stuff that's there that nobody's seeing is going to be out in the world is exciting. And we work with our blogger to have a blog post to describe something that's in our archives. And we try to think about, okay, what does this have to do with anything in the world? You know, why should anybody care? So that process we do once a month. And it's a lot of work. And it's interesting that we decided to organize that in marketing. I think it's different at every museum. And I know that my colleagues at other museums are struggling with, how do you do this? How do you make it happen? And we don't have a perfect solution, I will be honest. But it is a continuing iterative process, like what's working, how would we approach this? You know, should we do this or that? Should we do Periscope, or should we be shooting higher quality videos? So we're having a lot of conversations. And one other thing I'll bring up, MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, started something called Screening Room. And it's delightful. The marketing and the digital media staffs get together. We've gotten together 3 times, and I hosted the last one at the Guggenheim. And what we do is, behind closed doors, after hours, we each select one video, and we also invited Art21, which is a very nice platform that creates artist videos. We each show one video to each other, and we get feedback from 3 of the top digital people on everything. We talk about marketing, because you can't just create a video if nobody's going to see it. Sometimes you spend a lot of money doing that. The Met has spent a lot of money creating a lot of content that might not have been seen. And you have to think about how to learn. So like I showed you that MoholyNagy video. Since we made that video, we had a screening room, and we learned you don't put the title cards up front in Facebook. And the reason for that is because on Facebook, people aren't interested in seeing title cards. They want to see the video. You got to get their attention. So we're constantly learning from each other. And the point is, again, to collaborate with your colleagues in the arts. You have a lot of smart people in the arts, and you can learn an awful lot.
You said that almost 50% of the Guggenheim visitors are under 35. So what do you think in marketing terms is the key to get such young visitors? Or could it just be related to the huge use of social media and stuff like that?
Well, digital is increasingly important to reaching a younger audience, absolutely. It's the big change. I was telling my colleagues at the Peggy Guggenheim collection today that the New York Times, the audience online, and the audience that's looking at print ads, there's only 16% overlap, meaning you've got 2 completely different audiences. And the younger ones tend to be only digital. So it's very challenging in a very competitive place like New York City to be able to take the same budget that we've had since 2008 and all of a sudden have to support a digital outreach and also the same kind of print advertising. So it's increasingly difficult. And social media, even though it's perceived as free, is not free. A lot of staff work, there's an awful lot of behind the scenes work that gets done. So it's an increasing challenge, but yes, we do reach quite a young audience through social media.
Is there maybe one last question? No.
It's very important in your work, the social, the new media social communication. the Guggenheim has many young visitors. My question is, perhaps the old men don't use very well the new social media. For these people, is a problem for us, for you.
So the question is, what about people who have no interest or no understanding and want nothing to do with social media? And it's a really good question because there's been a lot of talk about millennials and this interest in the young, but the baby boomers are getting much older, and baby boomers are on social media, but there is an audience which you still need to serve, and you use things like print. We still have print advertising, and we have print materials available and object labels, and those materials are very important as our app. We provide our app on a free device, so it's just like an audio tour. Replace that audio tour, and hopefully we'll provide a very nice visitor experience for somebody that doesn't know anything about social media. It's completely fine.
Thank you, and thanks everyone. You're now all invited for a little cocktail in the foyer of the Teatrino. Thank you.
Thank you.